This all started a good year ago. More than that actually, nearly 2 years ago. I had a small shallow tank that I decided to turn into an ecosystem. It has a small filter in it to push some water around, but the point was that I didn't change any water. We feed the fish and they poop. The poop then creates food for the plants clean the water, and the cycle continues. So this is not what's known as a closed ecosystem, which would be, say, in a jar with a lid on that's never opened, but it is a kind of ecosystem. Everything's a kind of ecosystem, I guess. Anyway, that's not the point. So around 6 months ago, I decided to set up my biggest ecosystem yet. This 4-foot tank, 280 litres or 74 US gallons. This is way bigger than anything I've tried before, but with the success I'd had with the smaller tanks, I had high hopes for it doing well. I basically used the same format that I'd done previously with the smaller tank. Big chunky gravel at the base, stick some rocks on top of it, cap it all with a sand, add a little bit of nutrients to that base, and get planting. I chose some awesome manzanita wood for the main structural hardscape and some rhino stone for the rocks. To be honest, with these two, you could just chuck it in the tank and it would look good. Look at the detail on the rocks and that wood, it looks amazing, doesn't it? As always though, I used the finer particles of grey stone to create details around the rocks. Next up, it was time to get planting. Now I have 50 tanks in my studio, so there's plenty to choose from, and at that point, most of them were overgrown. Now it's very important for an ecosystem tank to plant incredibly densely, so that's what we did. Right from the start, we were planting tons of plants. But let's be honest, that's nothing unusual for me, is it? And we placed big Java ferns at key focal points around the tank and attached them using the usual method of superglue. Cyanoacrylate so it doesn't harm the fish or plants or anything like that. But in no time at all, they'd outgrown everything and needed a bit of a hack back. They'd taken over the whole tank, but to be honest, this is exactly what we wanted. You need a lot of plants for that filtration. Even though we haven't got a massive fish load, there's still a lot of waste being produced at all times. So at the point we're showing now, we're 3 months in and the tank is thriving. There's basically zero algae anywhere. A little bit, you know, that's natural, but not like anything that's a problem. The tank's perfectly balanced, the fish are doing great, and it's probably the most easiest tank I've ever done, especially a large one. Now there is something in me that absolutely loves this jungly rough look, but it still had to be hacked back, so that's what I did. And as a result, it looked quite bare for a little while. I started by removing the duckweed, which had just gone everywhere, and then started hacking back the stem plants right at the base. The idea was to save all of these and replant them just to give even more dense planting. Then at the points we'd trimmed, even more plants would grow. But the tank was looking really dark. Now I had one light on it, but it was set quite high. This is because when I set the tank up, I was worried about causing algae with high lighting and not proper big filtration, just that tiny little power head pushing water around. So not only did I bring the light right down low, I also added a second light. I was completely taken aback by the look of the tank now. It'd gone from looking murky and dark to sort of like a high-tech tank. The plants were looking so much more vibrant and they were even more healthy than I thought they were. Again, still worried about causing algae, I decided to get some more floating plants, but this time not the duckweed. My Neon Tetra Jungle tank was covered in Salvinia, so I pinched a bit from there and just put it on the surface, which covered the whole lot in no time. What's going on, beautiful people? So I came into the studio the normal way I usually do, and I was completely taken aback by the ecosystem aquarium. What do you mean, MD? You see this every day? Well, this is true, and because I see it every day, sometimes I take it for granted. Now recently I did a massive hack back on all the plants and I added a second light, and it has taken off. Not only are the plants growing insanely well, the colours are popping like crazy. The actual size of each leaf has grown as well. They don't look dainty, they look thick. They're growing so fast and so well that they're going to need another cutback very shortly. To be honest, some of them now actually need a tidy up. The fish seem to be mega happy as well. I think the addition of the floating plants, which is Salvinia, has really played a role in that. There's so many areas of the tank that they can just get lost in. Sometimes I'll come up to the tank and be like, where are all the fish? And to be honest, there isn't really a huge amount of fish in here. This is because, as described, it's an ecosystem tank. If you start putting a ton of fish in here, before you know it, you have more waste. And then, you could be in all sorts of trouble, the balance could be shot to bits, and the tank could crash, essentially, without a ton of water changes, and that's exactly what I don't want to be doing. As I've said before, this tank has not had a single water change now in nearly 6 months. I did a couple just to start with to get the murkiness out of the water, nothing since. I then spotted this really weird shrimp. At first I thought it was a wood shrimp, but it doesn't have any fans on it. You know, they put their fans out and filter the water, and it's clearly not an Amano shrimp either because they look completely different. So it's a complete mystery to me. I don't remember buying it. It maybe came on some plants at some point, but I have no idea. I don't mind though, to be honest. It's quite a nice surprise, especially in a tank like this, an ecosystem creating its own creatures. I mean, what? So yeah, as I mentioned there, I thought the tank was done. I was like, sort of losing interest in it because it had done its thing. It's grown out, you know, it's gone through its phases. It's just ticking along. But when I added that second light and saw the growth and saw how great everything was looking, it sort of revitalized my energy that I wanted to focus on it. Sometimes just changing a few things about your tank can really do that. I've done that now several times with several tanks. Something like adding a new plant that's going to grow huge, or a new fish, something that really changes the dynamics of the tank. Now, speaking of fish, all the originals are doing really, really well. Now, I say originals because we have guppies in it. Well, Endler guppies, not quite guppies, sort of are guppies. Anyway, it's quite a few females, and they were producing a lot of babies. Now, at that point, I added in a pair of Apistogramma. So you can see down here, this is the male. They're Apistogramma Vieja Super Red. And the female is actually just tucked back behind there. She did just come out and run forward just as I didn't have the camera, so I went and grabbed it and then she went back. Now, I'm not too worried about that because usually with Apistogramma, if they are sort of hiding quite a bit, the female, it usually means that they could be laying some eggs or bringing up some young or something like that. So hopefully that is the case because these guys haven't produced any babies for me yet, and all my other Apistogramma have. I say all my other Apistogramma, I've only got another pair and they're producing babies all the time. But yeah, the Endlers were popping off constantly. There's like, look right there. See that female? She's ready to pop again. In a few days, her belly will be nice and flat again. And I was hoping to get some babies out of this male that survive in a tank, but it turns out that the Apistogramma are absolutely prolific hunters, and the numbers just stay as adults. I don't see babies in here. Like, if we look around, there's no babies. Now, you would expect there to be a ton of babies dotted at the back there, hiding all amongst this foreground plants, but there are none, even with the amount of female Endlers we've got in here as well. So that says to me, predators are picking them off, and, you know, he just looks like he's a natural-born killer, doesn't he? Let me turn the ISO up so we can get in on him. You killing all the babies, fella? Killing them? Yeah, I mean, that's fair enough. That's just what you're there for. I just didn't know you were going to do it so prolifically. So yeah, like I say, we definitely want to take care of some of these plants. I don't want to get into the situation we had before where it was so overgrown, it just looked bleh. First thing we need to do then is take out some of those floating plants and replace them with some fresh ones. You don't have to do this, but you know, they've got to come out anyway at some point because they grow too fast. So the current Sylvinia is looking okay, especially these ones in the foreground. But you can see those ones in the background there have got a really weird sort of brown tinge to all the roots. This is because when this filter fell down, it stirred up a load of the mulm that was sat right in the foreground here. And as a result, that all flew up into the water column and just collected everywhere. Now, the reason I haven't picked this filter up and put it back where it was is because I'm really liking the flow and where it's going at the moment. It's sort of going up directly towards the surface. You can just see it shimmering on the top there, and it's not causing too much havoc for the stems in the far right corner, which is just what I want because I don't want them getting all twisted up like they did before. Now, the powerhead does have some decent flow to it. You can quite regularly see the fish dancing around in the flow. It's quite funny to watch actually. But also they can jump out of it just as quickly like there. So you can see the Apistogramma, he's hunting currently actually. You can see him darting in and out. He's looking for babies. I've seen him moving so fast then. He's looking, oh, it's her. There she goes. That makes sense. She's seeing off any predators. There must be some babies or eggs back there. The male's in the foreground, look, but to be honest, these aren't the two sort of species that stay together when there are young about, so that makes sense. He's not allowed at the back, but she's just coming out and having a look. That's really interesting. Really interesting to see. Oh look, and as I say that, we can see some of the ender guppies dancing in the flow. Look, they'll jump up, whoa, they'll do that. Looks like they're being blown, but they're swimming into it deliberately. They know what they're doing. They can stay away if they want to. They'll do it again, look. They come down. Oh, no, not this time. There she goes. He's doing it as well, see. They just enjoy. It's almost like they're just having a laugh in there. Just trying to have a bit of fun in the daytime. And that one there is my snakeskin one. He's my absolute favourite. So cool. You can spot him a mile off as well, can't you? Whoa! It's like a rocket. What are you doing, pal? At that distance over this side of the tank, that wasn't even the flow. That's him just messing around. Oh, it's nice to see though, isn't it? All the fish having such a good time. So yeah, anyway, let's remove some of these floating plants. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with them. They could carry on, but they're a little bit grubby, and if I don't take them out now, there's going to be a lot of them in no time. You may have noticed previously that I had a lot of duckweed in this tank. I started off with duckweed. I used to be a huge fan of duckweed, but that all changed when I got absolutely sick of trying to fish it out. Problem with duckweed is that if it gets any flow, it sort of gets pushed underwater as well and just gets trapped in all the plants. Really hard to scoop it out. And if you do change your mind at some point and you don't want duckweed in your tank anymore, tough. It's not going anywhere. There's the smallest little part of it will multiply in no time. Before you know it, you're back where you started. What I like about the Salvinia is, yes, it does replicate very fast, but you can just scoop it out so easily. It's not so small that it gets dragged underwater either. And I do think it looks really good as well. Kind of has a really natural look to it. Sort of like something you would see in real waterways. So here is the fresh stuff going in. You can sort of see there the difference between the old and the new. The fish are all very interested as well. I've no idea why. Oh, that's because they think I'm feeding them because the surface has been disturbed. No guys, not at the moment. But eventually this Salvinia here will look just like this one here. Hopefully with less sort of browny, molmy stuff on it. It doesn't look too bad, does it, to be honest? It looks very naturalistic. There we go, I've used that word again. You guys love it when I keep using that word. It just comes out. So we've now got to start trimming the stem plants. We should start with this single Rotala rotundifolia stem here. It looks so good, doesn't it? Even on its own, but it's got to go. It looks a bit silly, doesn't it? We need the rest to catch up. So pink and vibrant though, absolutely love it. Next up is all the stems behind it. I'm going to pull them down to like a similar level. Again, this is so that they all grow back up at the same rate. I wanted to grow level with the foreground stems, so it's all one sort of big curved mound, if you like. Not like perfectly neat or anything, but a bit more shape than we've currently got. I then spent ages separating each of the stems into its sizes, like size categories. I don't really know why I was doing that. The idea was that I was going to plug them all back in, but looking at the tank, I don't think I need to. So the original idea after trimming was to take the stems and replant them, but I don't think it's going to need it. They're going to grow back so great, and I want to keep that negative space right in the center there, so that we've pretty much just got the two dual islands. So that is this side done. I've managed to retain quite a nice sort of rough look to it. Normally when you trim your plants off, it looks kind of squared off and rough, but you know, this looks good. That looks natural to me. So we've still got to do the other side. Oh, we've got some Limnophila sessile in the middle there. I can never pronounce it, so I don't even really try. Oh, hello. Hello there. Thank you for cleaning. Thank you for doing a fantastic job. Love a bristlenose pleco. I am more of a favourite of the albino kind, or albino if you're in America. But yeah, anyway, so the left-hand side, again, it looks so good. I just don't want to touch it, but we've got to. So I can just trim this section like there, and then I'm going to do this one like that. So you've got like that, and then that. Hopefully it goes to plan anyway. So there we go, back looking neat again. I couldn't help myself. I had to leave that one. I had to leave that. It just looks so nice there. I couldn't trim it back, you know, down level with the pearlweed there. I just couldn't. It's like a torch in the middle. It just looks so good. Now, one of the really good things we've done here is we've removed a lot of the plants that block more light. So overall, the tank is going to receive more light now, meaning the plants will grow back better, thicker, more colour. Just overall, everything will be better this way. It's something that I've struggled with in the past because I didn't realise the benefits of it. Your tank can end up looking a little bit scraggly if you don't trim it back regularly. Now that's not because plant thickness, it's more because you start blocking out a lot of light. Now don't get me wrong, you can get great looking tanks with low light, but they never look quite the same as if you go to sort of a medium level. I would call this a medium level of light. And that is simply because these are budget lights. They're not the really high powerful ones you get from the big companies. But that's not something I worry about at all, especially when you can get tanks looking as good as this. In my opinion anyway. Now don't get me wrong, this is not the same as a high-tech tank would look, with CO2 and all of that. But I think I can be pretty proud with the overall results considering the fact we don't change any water in here, it's all done on a budget, there's one tiny little internal filter, and it's just fun. It just looks so good and it's fun. So some of you might be really interested in this and want to do it for yourselves. So I've come up with a list of the things I think will give you the greatest chance of success. Number 1, lots and lots of plants. Make this your top priority in your budget. You should be spending the most amount of money on the plants. At the end of the day, they're the thing you see the most. Even with hardscape, to be honest, eventually it's all covered in plants, isn't it? Number 2, link to plants. Pick lots of fast growing plants, especially to begin with. You want to go with fast growing stems. Any kind of limnophilia is a great one for this. That stuff grows super fast, even in low light, to be honest, as well. You do find that the nose between the leaves gets further apart in lower light, but it still looks great and it's always vibrant and green. Also, in the first few months, at least every trimming you make, replant it. Even if you're replanting it in the same places, get it really thick and dense, bushy, tons of growth, it's going to look great as well. Number 3, low stocking level. You're trying to create a balance here. You want just enough fish to produce waste that then is going to provide food for the plants. You don't want to be going to put in a huge amount of fish in there because that's going to require water changes pretty quickly, especially in the beginning when there isn't that huge amount of plant mass to sustain that amount of waste. It takes time for that to all build up, and you can add more fish later on if you want to because you'll have the plant mass to cope with it. Remember, we're always adding new plants because we're trimming and replanting, and then the food or the fish waste is generating more plants. And then at number 4, what I also found to be useful was only feed what's required. So with most of my tanks, I feed every other day, and that's definitely true of an ecosystem tank. Don't just chuck the food in as well. When you're feeding your fish, just do a little sprinkle, watch them. Hopefully they'll eat it before it even touches the floor, and then you can feed a little bit more and keep the process going until they've had enough food. There's absolutely no need to go just chucking a load of food in the water and then just walking off. It all sits on the bottom. Yeah, you're asking for trouble in no time, especially with this kind of setup. And then the final point, which is kind of linked to the first two because it's a plant, but I thought it deserved to be mentioned on its own because it's quite important, floating plants. Whether you choose duckweed, salvinia, mini water lettuce, or large water lettuce for that matter, whatever you want, make sure you've got a floating plant in there. Now, because we're not doing water changes on a tank like this, we need some way of exporting waste. So for me, I've got that little internal filter, so I can take out the sponges and clean those out. That's one way of getting the waste. But also, I'm regularly taking out floating plants. They grow so fast that I need to take out huge scoops of them every week. Now, for the floating plants to grow, they use nitrates in the water. So by removing them from the water column and allowing more to grow, you're keeping the nitrate level at a good medium level. In fact, this tank is so well developed now, my nitrate level is very, very low in this tank. I did notice last week that a few of the plants were starting to look a bit drab, so I actually added nitrates to the tank. But then that's because this has been running for 6 months. It's in like a perfect balance and it's working so efficiently. At this stage, to be honest, I could add more fish, and I probably will do in future videos because I'm looking forward to switching it up a bit. I'm thinking about putting an arowana in. No, that's a joke. Tank's nowhere near big enough for an arowana. Maybe a baby, but then you've got to give it back, and no one wants to do that with that kind of fish today.